Under the glittering chandelier of the Lagos Continental Hotel, Vanessa Umay stood poised in a floor-length emerald gown that shimmered like envy under the flashing lights. Cameras clicked. Applause echoed. Laughter and champagne flowed like honeyed lies. The stage glowed with the golden plaque that read Woman of the Year, Vanessa Umay, for outstanding philanthropy. At 39, she had become a symbol of grace, elegance, and charitable success. The media called her Nigeria's darling, the business world called her a force, but tonight the crowd called her inspirational. She accepted the award. With practiced humility, her smile serene, her speech measured something about empowering girls, giving back, remembering where one comes from, but her eyes told a different story. Minutes later, away from the glitz and the lights, Vanessa stood, alone backstage in a quiet service corridor. Gone was the elegance, stripped by the rawness of what she held in her hand, a crumpled, greasy envelope that smelled faintly of suya and desperation. Her fingers trembled as she slid the photo out. A teenage girl, no older than 16, stared back at her from the glossy print. The girl was dressed in a cheap waitress uniform, her expression tired but defiant. She held up a cardboard sign scrawled in thick black marker. Asterisk, my mum left me for money. Do you think she's proud now? Asterisk, Vanessa's breath hitched. Her legs gave way, and she leaned against the cold wall for support. The photo slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor. Her face, cracked lips quivering, eyes wide with disbelief, shame rising fast and sharp like bile in her throat. She clutched the fabric of her gown as though trying to hold herself together, and just like that, memory crashed in. A tiny apartment in Odu, the walls stained with watermarks and struggle. A hot Sunday afternoon, a 7-year-old girl clinging to her mother's dress, her small voice breaking, "Mummy, please don't go." Vanessa, then just 23, young but already hardened by hunger and heartbreak, turned away. Her eyes had been fixed on the man in the Mercedes waiting outside, engine humming like a promise. Her suitcase was light, but her decision was heavier than any burden she'd ever carried. "I'll come back for you," she whispered, not even sure if she meant it. She never did. Backstage, present day, Vanessa slid to the floor, the cool marble unforgiving against her knees. Her eyes locked on the photo, lying face up, the edges curled, the ink slightly smudged, maybe by a tear, maybe by a fry oil fingerprint. The past she had buried under charity dinners, press interviews, and foundation launches had clawed its way to the surface, and this time it came wearing the face of the daughter she abandoned. A voice echoed in her mind, her own voice, worn and reflective. Asterisk, sometimes the choices we make for survival bury us alive. Asterisk, and as the sound of distant applause drifted through the hallway, Vanessa sat in silence, the weight of her reward heavy in one hand, and the truth of her failure even heavier in the other. Vanessa Umay, formerly Vanessa was once a young single mother clawing her way through life with blistered hands and sleepless nights. At just 21, she gave birth to her daughter Zina, after a brief naive relationship with a man who vanished the moment responsibility reared its head. Left to fend for herself in a cramped one-bedroom flat in Oyodu, Vanessa juggled 3 exhausting jobs: waitress by day, cleaner by night, and a part-time secretary for a law firm on weekends. There were days she barely ate just to make sure Zina had a spoonful of rice and gari. The power outages, the leaking roof, the unpaid school fees, they all added up like weights on her shoulders. But what broke her spirit wasn't just the poverty. It was the shame, the constant feeling that no matter how hard she tried, she was still failing her child. Then came Henry Umahoda, confident and wildly successful in Nigeria's growing tech sector. He swept into Vanessa's world like a lifeline. At first, it felt like rescuer man who saw her, offered her comfort, expensive dinners, whispered promises of luxury and safety. He told her she was meant for more than the struggle. He painted a vision, a mansion in Banana Island, trips to London, charity galas, a new last name. But there was a condition, one he didn't say outright at first. No baggage, no ties, no child. He never used the word abandon, but his meaning was clear. If she wanted to step into his world, she'd have to erase the one she came from. Vanessa resisted at first. She tried to find another way, maybe send Zina to boarding school, maybe work something out. But the pressure mounted. The bills kept coming, Zina's cough wouldn't stop, and Vanessa's body was giving out from exhaustion. She made the hardest decision of her life. She sent her daughter to live with distant relatives in Atlanta, people she barely knew but who promised better schooling, better chances. She wired money when she could, called twice, and then stopped. Henry didn't ask again. She knew it was what he wanted. Years passed. Vanessa reinvented herself as Mrs. Vanessa Ume, the beloved face of the Ume Foundation. She became the poster woman for elite philanthropists supporting girls' education, attending women's panels, featured on magazine covers as a symbol of empowerment. The irony was not lost on her, but she buried it deep. Publicly, she was admired. Privately, she lived under Henry's thumb. He picked her friends, decided which charities were politically safe, even approved the speeches she gave. He never hit her, never shouted, but he controlled her with silence, with subtle disapproval, with the constant reminder that he had given her everything. And there was one rule she could never break. The past was off limits. Zina's name was never to be spoken in their home. Any attempt to revisit that chapter was met with coldness, withdrawal, a chilling reminder of the price of disobedience. So Vanessa did what she was told. She smiled for the cameras, shook hands with dignitaries, and told herself that Zina would understand one day, that the sacrifice was worth it. But Zina never forgot. Now, 18, Zina Okoye had grown up with a bitter taste in her mouth and questions no one wanted to answer. Passed from aunt to cousin to near strangers in Atlanta, she learned early how to survive. She worked tables, skipped prom, learned to fight her own battles, and one day, while wiping tables in a downtown diner, she saw a glossy magazine cover. At the cashier stand, there was her mother Vanessa Umebiming in diamonds and pearls, titled Africa's Mother of the Year. The rage that erupted inside her was cold, surgical. Zina didn't cry. She got to work. She began digging her mother's public life, noting the cracks behind the perfection. She watched speeches, noted inconsistencies, mapped out her connections. And then she wrote the message on the cardboard sign, snapped the photo, and mailed it in an envelope soaked in fryer grease. Not to extort, not for attention, but because she wanted her mother to know she was still here, and that this time she was the one coming. Now, Vanessa finds herself celebrated by the world, yet slowly unraveling under the weight of her oldest sin. Her name opens doors, but her past is about to blow them off their hinges, because Zina is no longer the helpless child Vanessa left behind. She's a young woman with nothing to lose and a mother to confront. Whether for answers, vengeance, or both, Zena is coming, and Vanessa's perfect life is standing on borrowed time. It began with a letter, plain white envelope, no return address, slid beneath the brass gate of the UMA estate like a whisper from the past. Vanessa found it tucked into the morning paper by the maid, her fingers brushing over the slightly smudged ink of her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Something in her gut twisted. She waited until Henry had gone to the gym before locking herself in the guest bathroom and tearing the envelope open. Out spilled a handful of photographs, blurry, grainy, but unmistakably real. One showed Zena in a blue diner uniform, exhausted, leaning against a counter, bags heavy beneath her eyes. Another, a cot in a shelter, Zena curled up with her hoodie pulled over her head, a backpack as her pillow. The final image was a medical invoice clearly overdue. A red stamp marked final notice. There was a note. Just one line, scrawled in black ink. Asterisk, you didn't just abandon me. You replaced me. Asterisk, Vanessa's chest constricted. Her knees buckled slightly, and she sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at the photos with shaking hands. She couldn't cry, not yet. The tears were stuck somewhere behind years of practiced composure. She folded the photos and note back into the envelope, slid it into a makeup drawer beneath layers of old receipts and prescription eye cream. She couldn't let Henry see it. He would ask questions, or worse, he wouldn't ask anything at all, and instead punish her with that quiet disapproval that cut deeper than shouting ever could. Later that week, under the pretense of visiting a charity partner on the mainland, Vanessa detoured to Age, where her former sister-in-law, Amica, still lived. The apartment block was smaller than she remembered, the paint peeling, the air heavy with diesel fumes. Amica opened the door with a startled expression that quickly hardened into suspicion. "Vanessa," she asked, folding her arms. "Well, look who decided to remember her daughter has blood." "I just want to know if Zena's all right," Vanessa said quietly. Amica gave a dry laugh, one without humor. "Now you care. She cried for you every birthday. Sat by the phone on Christmas. You know how many lies we told to keep her from hating you. That you were busy, that you were sick, that you would come." Her eyes burned. "You let a child believe she was the one who wasn't enough." Vanessa stood there, absorbing the words like slaps to the face. She left without getting much more. Amica had no recent contact information, but the visit opened a wound Vanessa hadn't realized still bled. That night, the nightmare started. Always the same. Zena, as a little girl, knocking at a door with small fists, calling out "Mummy, please," and Vanessa dressed in her finest makeup, perfect, walking to the door and locking it from the inside. The sound of the lock snapping echoed louder than the cries. She'd wake in a sweat, Henry's hand resting heavily on her hip, her breath shallow like she was drowning in shame. The next day, after making sure Henry was occupied with meetings, Vanessa opened her laptop and searched. Her fingers hovered uncertainly before she typed, "Zena, okay." The results were sparse, but she found an Instagram account, mostly poems, black and white photos, and quotes about abandonment and healing. Then a story highlight, a flyer for an open mic night at a small arts cafe downtown. Asterisk Friday, 7 p.m. Theme, what we carry. Asterisk Vanessa hesitated for hours. But Friday evening, dressed down in jeans, a baseball cap pulled low, and dark sunglasses, she parked 2 streets away and walked into the cafe just as the room dimmed. She sat in the back, half hoping Zena wouldn't show. Then she did, tall, with Vanessa's jawline and the unmistakable fire of youth in her eyes. Zena took the mic, didn't look nervous. She stood with the weight of someone who had lived too much for her age. She introduced her piece simply. "This is called The Mother Who Forgot Me." Then she began. The poem was raw, fierce, devastating. It was a confession and a confrontation all at once. Lines about birthdays spent alone. A mother who turned her face to gold while her daughter faded into dust. The ache of being discarded like trash. The crowd snapped their fingers, murmured mess of empathy, but Vanessa sat frozen. The tears came hot and fast, sliding down her cheeks silently as she covered her mouth with one hand. Her other clutched tight round the hem of her coat. For the first time, she saw Zena not as the child she left behind, but as a woman full of pain, strength, and a voice that would no longer be silenced. That night marked the shift. Vanessa realized that Zena wasn't just surviving, she was speaking. And the world, whether Vanessa liked it or not, was about to listen. Vanessa sat in her darkened study late one night, staring at Zena's Instagram page like it was a doorway she no longer had the right to enter. She had typed and deleted the same message 3 times before settling on a simple asterisk. "Zena, it's me. I saw your performance. I'm proud of you. Can we talk?" She hit send, then closed her eyes and waited for something, anything. A response, a typing bubble. Nothing came. Days passed. Vanessa refreshed the page more times than she cared to admit. Still no reply. Not one to give up icily, she called the dynagot, put on hold, then hung up on, so she tried something softer. She had an assistant send a tasteful bouquet of lilies. Zena's birth flower with a handwritten card. Asterisk, "I'm thinking of you. Love, Mum." But Zena posted a story that same afternoon of the flowers in the trash can behind the diner. Captioned, asterisk, "Some things can't be fixed with pretty petals." Asterisk, determined, and running out of ways to reach her. Vanessa drove to the diner herself one cloudy Tuesday, wearing a long coat and oversized sunglasses. She waited in the corner booth, her heart pounding as Zena emerged from the back, tying her apron. Their eyes met. Zena froze, then turned without a word and walked straight out the front door, leaving her shift mid-service. Vanessa called her name, but the slam of the door drowned it out. From that point on, Vanessa began to unravel. Her sleep fractured, haunted by dreams of Zena crying on a mattress on the floor while Vanessa sat sipping champagne at a gala. She stared blankly at charity board meetings, missed her cues during televised interviews, and flinched when people asked her about motherhood initiatives. The smile she'd worn for years cracked around the edges. At home, Henry noticed. "What's wrong with you lately?" he asked one morning, stirring his coffee with quiet irritation. "You're distracted. Embarrassing yourself in front of sponsors." "I'm just tired," she murmured, keeping her voice light. Henry watched her for a long beat. "Is that all?" She nodded, smiled, lied. But Henry had built his empire by sniffing out secrets. Within days, he had hired a private investigator. 1 week later, he confronted her in their marble kitchen with the results. "So, you've been chasing that girl behind my back." Vanessa's stomach dropped. "I gave you this life," Henry hissed, voice low and full of contempt. "I took you from the gutter, from scraping change. You think you get to go off script now? She's my daughter, Henry. She's asterisk the past. And I told you this life, our asterisk life, doesn't include messes like her. You owe me your loyalty." That word loyalty landed like poison. For years, Vanessa had accepted his control as structure, his condescension as sophistication. But now she saw it clearly. Henry didn't love her. He owned her. Her silence had been the price of her place. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she drove alone to another spoken word event downtown, blending into the crowd in the back. Again, this time, Zena saw her from the stage before her name was even called. She hesitated, then adjusted the mic. "So, this next piece isn't for claps," she said flatly. "It's for closure. For the woman who taught me what silence sounds like." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Vanessa stood frozen, wanting to disappear. But the performance went on, and when it was over, Zena stepped down from the stage, walked straight to the back of the room, and faced her mother with all the fire in her chest. "You don't get to be sorry now," she said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You don't get to cry after walking out and locking the door behind you. I cried myself to sleep for years, and you were picking out marble countertops." Vanessa's voice broke as she whispered, "I was trying to survive." Zena didn't flinch. "No, you were trying to forget." And then she walked away, leaving Vanessa in full view of a room now watching, not a philanthropist, but a stranger with secrets leaking through her designer. Seems by the following week, things began to shift. Rumors swirled. A local journalist, curious about Zena's viral poem and the older woman seen at multiple events, started digging. She sent polite but pointed emails to Vanessa's office. Asterisk, "Can we confirm the nature of your relationship to Zena Okoye? There are questions about why your public biography makes no mention of a child." Asterisk, the carefully curated image Vanessa had maintained for over a decade. Mrs. Umay, community builder, advocate for women and children, was starting to crack under scrutiny. Donors hesitated. Boards whispered. And beneath it all, Vanessa felt the walls closing in. Not just from the media or Henry's growing suspicion, but from within herself. Because for the first time, she didn't want to pretend. She just didn't know if the truth would ruin her before it set her free. The invitation came from a major talk show, an hour-long special on motherhood and resilience, hosted by a beloved media personality who had championed Vanessa's philanthropic work for years. On paper, it was a perfect opportunity, a chance to restore her image, control the narrative. But this time, Vanessa didn't want to curate anything. She didn't want a stylist or a speech. She wanted the truth. When Henry saw the email, he went cold. He stood in their vast bedroom, watching her pack a simple navy dress into a garment bag. "You're not doing it," he said flatly. Vanessa didn't look up. "Yes, I am." Henry's voice rose, sharp. "Don't bring shame to this house." She stopped folding and turned to face him. "This house is already shameful. You just put better curtains over the rot." His eyes narrowed, stunned by her tone. But she didn't wait for the storm. She zipped up the bag, walked past him, and didn't flinch when he slammed the door behind her. The day of the interview, Vanessa arrived at the studio early. She declined makeup, declined the designer rack sent by the producers. She wore a simple blouse, tied her hair back, and sat under the hot lights, barefaced and exposed. When the cameras rolled, and the host began with soft pleasantries about her achievements, Vanessa held up a hand. "I'd like to speak plainly," she said, voice calm but heavy. "Before I was anyone's wife, before the events and awards and applause, I was a mother, and I failed. I abandoned my daughter." Her voice caught for a second, but she pushed through. "I told myself it was survival, that I was choosing stability. But the truth is, I chose comfort. I chose a man's approval over my child's need for me, and no amount of money or charity work will erase that. She looked directly into the camera. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because the first step toward healing for her, for Ms. to stop hiding. I want to make it right, not with words, with actions. The silence in the studio was thick. Then the host reached over and touched her hand, visibly moved. The segment aired live. Within minutes, clips began flooding social media. By the time Vanessa returned home, the gates were locked. Her access code had been changed. Henry met her at the driveway, flanked by security. "You embarrassed me," he hissed, "in front of the entire country." Vanessa didn't argue. She just opened the trunk of her car, pulled out a single suitcase, and walked away from the estate without looking back. She checked into a modest hotel on the island. No assistants, no drivers, just herself and the roar of the world outside. The media response was instant and polarized. Some called her a monster, accused her of performative guilt, of using her daughter for redemption. Others praised her honesty, hailing her as a cautionary tale that didn't shy from the stain of truth. The morning after the interview, there was a knock on her hotel room door. Vanessa opened it to find Zena standing there, arms folded, face unreadable. "That was brave," Zena said. "But don't expect a hug." Vanessa stepped aside to let her in. "I don't want forgiveness. I want truth." They sat across from each other at the small table by the window. No cameras, no script, just raw silence and the hum of traffic outside. What followed was hours of conversation, halting at first, then unfiltered. Vanessa told her everything. The nights she almost turned back, the lies she told herself to sleep at night, the guilt that buried itself under diamonds and dinner parties. Zena told her about the shelters, the shame, the rage that hardened her spine. They didn't cry, not right away, but something cracked open between them and Evan Real. For the first time, they spoke as equals, as women shaped by pain on opposite ends of the same decision. By the end of the night, nothing was fixed, but something had shifted. Vanessa had chosen the hard road one, without comfort, without control. But in doing so, she reclaimed herself, not as an image, but as a flawed human mother who was finally learning how to show up. A year had passed, quietly but deliberately. The grand halls and marble countertops were gone, replaced by the creaking floors and warm chaos of a renovated duplex on the mainland, now known as the Second Chance House. Vanessa ran it with the kind of devotion that didn't need cameras or applause. It was a shelter, yes, but more than that. A sanctuary for single mothers who had been abandoned, beaten down, or simply overwhelmed. Women who were one decision away from disappearing into survival, like she once had. She walked the halls every morning, greeting each mother by name, remembering their children's birthdays, holding babies while mums attended job interviews. She led workshops on budgeting, healing, and self-forgiveness. In the evenings, she wrote handwritten letters, sometimes to women still in shelters, other times to former residents starting over in new cities. She always signed them the same way, asterisk, from one mother who got it wrong and is still learning. Asterisk. Vanessa wasn't rich anymore. She took the bus, ate simply, wore the same 3 pairs of shoes. But for the first time in decades, she slept through the night. She no longer lived with the constant ache of a hidden truth. Zena visited, sometimes never, announced, always on her own terms. She helped with the younger girls, taught them how to use Canva for resumes, gave them tips on side hustles. Her tone was still guarded, her affection measured, but her presence meant everything. They shared coffee now, exchanged real conversations, and sometimes, when no one was looking, they laughed, brief, unpolished, and real. That spring, Zina stood on a TEDx stage in a red jumpsuit, bold and unapologetic. Her voice carried the weight of every tear she had once swallowed. She told her story without flinching, of abandonment, of rage, of healing on her own terms. Near the end, her voice softened. "The woman who broke me," she said, "is trying to help others now. That's not weakness, that's growth. And while I don't believe in fairy tale endings, I believe in accountability. I believe in people who change even when it costs them everything." Backstage, Vanessa waited quietly, her heart full but braced. When Zina stepped behind the curtain, they didn't speak right away. Then, without ceremony, Zina wrapped her arms around her mother, not tightly, not tearfully, but firmly, like a door closing on the past and opening just a crack on something new. Vanessa didn't need the world's redemption anymore. She had earned something better, her own. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long, golden shadows across the quiet park. Children shrieked with laughter in the distance, their joy bouncing off the swings and slides. Vanessa and Zina walked side by side, slowly, as if neither wanted to rush the moment. At a small vendor cart, Zina stopped and bought 2 ice creams, 1 vanilla, 1 strawberry, without asking, just like she used to beg for when she was little. They found an empty bench near the edge of the playground, sat in silence, watching. A group of kids chased bubbles that floated like tiny glass planets. The air smelled of cut grass and melted sugar. Vanessa took a careful bite of her cone, then glanced sideways at her daughter. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than a breath. "You deserved better." Zina didn't look away from the children. She licked her ice cream and gave a small, thoughtful nod. "And now, I'm starting to believe I'm worth it." Vanessa blinked against the burn behind her eyes. Her fingers, hesitant, reached across the bench. For a moment, she thought Zina wouldn't respond. But then gently, quietly, Zina let her hand be held. They sat like that for a long while. No speeches, no apologies, just 2 women, bound by a scarred history, choosing presence over perfection. Somewhere in the background, a child squealed with joy. A mother called out lovingly, and in that stillness, between melting ice cream and held hands, a new story began, not perfect, but real. Asterisk, some stories don't end in perfect pictures, but they can still begin again. Asterisk.